Hey guys, Crypto Mike here with the mic check 1212. Is this thing on? Please hit the thumbs up, the subscribe, and the notification bell if you enjoy my live streams and new videos. Also download Twitter and follow me on Twitter if you like cryptocurrency. That's the only reason I'm on Twitter, really. Crypto Twitter. Crypto Twitter is awesome. All right, guys. Now let me show you some things I've been learning and finding out, and I wanted to share with you. I'm very excited to learn this, and it's an opinion, but once I learned about the fourth turning and William Straus and what's the guy's name? Neil Howe's book, The Fourth Turning, something clicked, and I'm really interested in it, and it really goes along with the whole Great Reset narrative. Finally, very nicely. So let me show you what got me into it. Okay, what I saw that really changed my mind, or really not changed my mind, but helped me to realize that yes, this is a huge plan. It's a big part of the plan. Plans within plans. The fourth turning. We are in the fourth stage. Okay, every 80 to 90 years, there's a big transition period. There's a big transition period between the fourth turning and the first turning. We're in the fourth turning. We're in the crisis stage right now. Crisis, collapse. This is the collapse stage. And then we go into the new stage, which is an era of highs and everyone's happy. Everyone's kind of reeling off of the all the euphoria of what happened and what they overcame in this stage, the fourth turning. Okay, we're gonna go through a lot of stuff, a lot of things together as humans in the next few years that are gonna really dislodge our trust in the old system, and they really want us to want the new system. Okay, so as long as you have an understanding, I'm going to put this video, this is a great video, I'm going to put the link to it in the description. I'm not going to show you guys, but it's only a 10-minute video. I highly suggest checking it out. He explains it so well. All right. And just give him a little credit. His name is Roger James Hamilton. I highly suggest that you subscribe to his YouTube channel. All right. So give you a little brief description here. The fourth turning. What exactly is the fourth turning envisioned by William Straus and Neil Howe? We revisited this book. This book was written in 1997 in light of recent events and found the subjects both timely and prophetic. Now, if you're watching my channel and you're a big fan of XRP, XRP has a big part to play in this, but it's much bigger than XRP. Okay, we're just focused on it because we think, that's our way to get rich. And all right, but don't worry, just hold your XRP. I'm sure you're gonna get rich. Not financial advice, but there's so much more. Now, if you can just be aware of what's happening, you'll actually, in my opinion, I feel a little better that I know what's coming. And so that I don't have to pay attention to the minuscule events that are happening right now, the riots. I mean, yeah, I'm paying attention to Black Lives Matter, but I don't need to get involved in the riots. Okay, I'm always respectful towards Black people, so I don't have anything to do with the riots. All right, now the Australian wildfires. There's just so much happening, especially here in 2020. We got everything happening. All right, now let's go. Written in 1997, the book's full title says it all. The Fourth Turning, An American Prophecy, What the Cycles of History Tell Us About America's Next Rendezvous with Destiny. In light of Steve Bannon's obsession with the thesis, we recently reread the book. Steve Bannon, huh? Howe and Straus observe that American history shows a new era, or a turning, about every 20 years. In simplest terms, the first turning is an upbeat era of strengthening institutions. Now here, they describe it as a high, an upbeat era of strengthening institutions and weakening individualism when a new civic order implants and the old values regime decays. Okay, the old values regime, we're still in it. We're about to transition to a new values regime. This first turning is the era just after a crisis period. So right after this period that we're in, hang tight, because then that's when we get our high. That's when we get our euphoria, our upbeat era of strengthening institutions and weakening individualism. Not saying I want weakening individualism, but it seems to be part of the plan, guys. Okay? The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the old order comes under attack. All right. Now, we have a diagram here. We can take a look. All right. We have two full turnings here. We have two periods, two 80-year periods right here. Awakening, unraveling, crisis, high. Awakening, unraveling, crisis, high. We are in crisis right here. This is where we're at. Okay, this stage ends in 2025. All right, it can be give or take a few years. All right, so it might end quicker, which I think it'll end quicker than 2025. We should see our euphoric high of the first turning sometime between now and 2025. That's when it'll start. Okay, so the second turning that we're talking about, the third is unraveling, awakening. A passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the old order comes under attack. All right. Now we can see the first one was a high. That was the first turning in 1945. That was right after World War II. Okay. Now you have the awakening, which happened in 1965. That kind of seems to be the era of, the Vietnam War. Well, yeah. And then basically that was when all the hippies came out, started taking acid, and the Beatles were popular, and that's when there was a big a challenge to the status quo in America. A passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the old order comes under attack. The hippies, the acid, the Beatles, the monkeys, all of those. The Rolling Stones came a little later, but they all came out, and there was a big, come on, the summer of '69. They had a lot of fun back then, and I tell people all the time, I wish I was born in the 50s. I wish I was born in the 50s, but hey, no regrets. I signed my soul contract, right? So right now is the perfect time for me to be in. The third turning is an unraveling. A time when individualism is strengthened and institutions are weakened. The third turning, okay? We just came out of the third turning, all right? It's in 2008, okay? That was the end of the third turning and the beginning of the fourth turning, 2008, okay? So that's why I say give or take a few years, all right? It was supposed to start in 2005. It really kind of started in 2007, 2008, 2009. All right, so when you order the book, I'm not trying to sell the book or anything. When I order the book, the first thing it says, Chapter 1, Winter Comes Again. America feels like it's unraveling. Though we live in an era of relative peace and comfort, we have settled into a mood of pessimism about the long-term future, fearful that our superpower nation is somehow rotting from within. There you go. That's the first paragraph of the book. The third turning is an unraveling, okay? The fourth turning, that's where we are at, is a crisis, a decisive era of secular upheaval. An old order is toppled and the new one is put in its place. As America's most recent third turning began in the mid-1980s, it was due to expire in the first decade of the 21st century. And it did. If we accept Howe and Straus's thesis, America has already entered its next fourth turning. The consequences are immense. We quote as follows, quote, "History is seasonal and winter is coming. Like nature's winter, the secular winter can come early or late. A fourth turning can be long and difficult, brief but severe, or perhaps mild. Let's hope for the mild version of the fourth turning, but something tells me it's going to be pretty severe. We'll see. But like winter, it cannot be averted. It cannot be averted. It must come in its turn. The next fourth turning is due to begin shortly after the new millennium, midway through the OO decade. Around the year 2005, a sudden spark will catalyze a crisis mood. Okay, remember now they wrote the book 8 years before. They published this book 8 years before that 2005 point. All right, so it started like 10 years after the book was released. Real hardship will beset the land with this severe distress that could involve questions of class, race, nation, and empire. That's kind of what's happening right now, guys. Class warfare, race warfare, everything. The nation's split. They predicted it. It's basically, I believe this is a plan, and it turns over and over. All right, and then it goes according to plan. The very survival of the nation will feel at stake, and that's what's happening. Sometime before the year 2025, America will pass through a great gate in history. This is a transition of time periods, guys. It will commensurate with the American Revolution, Civil War, and twin emergencies of the Great Depression and World War II. The risk of catastrophe will be very high. The nation will erupt into insurrection or civil violence, that's what's happening, crack up geographically, or succumb to authoritarian rule. Now you guys, this is the first stage. There's 5 stages of the fourth turning. This is the very first stage, okay? We have 4 more stages after this until we can reach the next turning. All right, so it's going to take a few years probably, guys. All right, just be aware that all these things that are happening, they were already predicted. They were basically already planned out, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. This is the scariest part right here. Every fourth turning has registered an upward ratchet in the technology of destruction and in mankind's willingness to use it. Howe and Straus caution that Americans can be expected to encounter personal and public choices that are equal to the harshest ever faced by prior generations. Let me just read that one more time. Howe and Straus caution that Americans can be expected to encounter personal and public choices that are equal to the harshest ever faced by prior generations. You guys, they're talking about we might be going through a greater depression than they went through in the 30s. And that's scary. But being aware ahead of time allows you to take the necessary steps to be precautionary and be prepared. It will require us to admit that our faith in linear progress has often amounted to a Faustian bargain with our children. Faust always ups the ante, and every bet is double or nothing. Ugh. Through much of the third turning, it just shows how much the ones who are in charge really are concerned about us. How much they really care about us. We're just numbers, we're just products. Through much of the third turning, which was the last one we were in the 80s and the 90s, we have managed to postpone the reckoning. But history warns that we can't defer it beyond the next bend in time. This one's a little more detailed. National goals, so the first turning is next. That's after this turning. All right, that'll be an upbeat era of strengthening institutions, basically our new financial structure, and probably politics as well. Weakening individualism. Unfortunately, they're saying that this happens every time. So basically, Agenda 2030, gathering us into large cities and using Internet of Things, 5G, AI, VR, all that stuff. Robotics, machine learning, all that stuff is going to be the new way that we become more of a globalist society, because we'll be interconnected completely. All right, you guys? Now, this is the era just after a crisis period when the society if rebuilding, recovering, and strengthening itself after the devastation of the crisis. National goals and unity have a higher priority than individual values, and that'll be starting in sometime around 2025, maybe earlier, hopefully, I guess. Probably in a few years. We probably have like 2 years, you guys. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the civic order comes under attack from a new values regime. During this period, the hubristic leaders from the hero generation that fought and hopefully won the last crisis war are challenged by the spirituality and values of their children from the prophet generation. Now, we're talking about prophets and heroes. Let me scroll up. Let me show you what we're talking about here. All right. Okay, so the fourth turning theory is based on the work that Straus and Howe began in the 1980s. They noticed that people differ dramatically based on what generation they're in. They found that the people who fought in World War II were quite different from people who were raised during World War II, and that those were quite different, those who grew up after World War II, after. The similarities among people in the same generation outweighed the individual differences, and the differences between people in different generations were usually enormous compared to differences between individuals in the same generation. They were not the first to notice that one generation differs from another, of course. The popular press regularly labels generations with such names as Generation X, Generation Y, Baby Boomers, and so forth, and many articles are published discussing the characteristics of one generation versus another. For example, the babies born in the 1930s and 40s were originally called Depression babies, but in the 50s, Time magazine gave them a new name, the Silent Generation, because they valued conformity and loyalty above all else and didn't complain about much. Now, based on that, I'd say the 30s were in the fourth turn. No, they must have been in the first turning, or maybe that was the third turning. Unraveling. I'm thinking that was the first turning. Let's take a look. The first turning was in. The first turning is high. Okay, so that was the crisis babies. They didn't complain much. Interesting. Okay, anyways, now let's go back. The members of the Silent Generation were too young to fight in World War II, so they lived in the shadow of the GI generation. Their older brothers and sisters who became heroes who actually fought in the war, and are now called Tom Brokaw and others by Tom Brokaw, the greatest generation of the 20th century. Meanwhile, the Silents had to deal with a new generation, the Baby Boomers, who were born after the war. The Boomers were very sure of themselves and led the anti-war riots and demonstration. That's during the awakening period, during the 1960s and 1970s, rebelling against their parents in the GI generation. The Silents were sandwiched between these two warring generations and served as mediators and compromisers. This is so interesting, guys. Okay, so they embarked on a project to read histories and diaries written through American history, passing on through colonial times, going back to the original English settlers. Reading these histories and diaries, they came to a startling conclusion. Generations following historical fourth turnings or crisis wars, following the pattern as generations followed World War II, and that the sequence of these generations leads to the next crisis war. Okay, the fourth turning authors identified 4 distinct generational types that are repeated over and over and are similar to the generations they had studied. The fourth generations are as follows. The hero generation, like America's GI generation, these are the young men and women that fight in a crisis period. After the crisis ends, they become society's powerful civic leaders who build new institutions that promote social order and productive activity. They become hubristic, and in their elder years, they're attacked politically by their children in the prophet generation. The artist generation. Like America's silent generation, they grow up as children during the crisis period, come of age as sensitive young adults, and grow old becoming indecisive but empathetic leaders. Interesting. hold on, I was born in the 80s. Let me see where I was born. Okay, the 80s. Oh, I was born in the unraveling, right as the unraveling begun. Interesting. The prophet generation, like America's baby boomers, they're born after the crisis period and grow up in the glow of success. In the case of the boomers, they grew up at a time when America was beaten. They had beaten the Nazis and had beaten the Depression. The prophets grow into narcissistic adults who challenge the authority of their parents, the heroes. In midlife, they become moralistic and end up as the wise elders leading the society into a new crisis period. The nomad generation, these people grow up in the shadow of the prophets and don't get along with them very well. They become alienated young adults with a high incidence of crime and drug abuse, but mellow into pragmatic life leaders during a crisis period. Okay. Now, that's enough for now. I'm going to do more on this subject because I think it's very interesting, and I'm going to be reading the book and studying this a little bit because this makes a lot of sense to me, guys. All right? Now, look at this. The following are the 6 fourth turning crisis events described by the fourth turning. All right, the book. The War of the Roses in 1459. That was a fourth turning. There was a civil war between the ruling houses of Lancaster and New York. Armada crisis in 1569. Spain's invasion of England was thwarted. Glorious Revolution, 1965. King Philip's War and Bacon's Rebellion in the colonies began a long crisis period that included England's Glorious Revolution of 1688. Then there was the famous American Revolution, the famous Civil War, and the Great Depression in World War II. Those were all terrible things. I mean, the American Revolution was good for us, I guess. Everything else was bad. And a lot of people died. And it's cause for concern. That's why I'm telling you guys this, okay? Because I want you guys to be prepared just like I am. And I still need to do more to get prepared, all right? But I definitely believe there's time to prepare, okay, for a time of crisis, okay? We're just about to enter crisis, okay? Remember, food, just go study the Great Depression, okay? And just know life is not going to be the same as it used to be. And accept it and be okay with it. Embrace it, all right? Because it's not going to change. It's set in place. The wheels are turning and you can't stop them, okay? That's what they're saying here with the seasons, all right? All right, that's what I wanted to show you guys. Now, I'm going to drop the link to this video. I'll go ahead and leave you guys with a little bit of what he's telling you, all right? Because I have a few minutes left.
And gave them a name. The very first one, which was a spring they called the High. And the High was the time when a brand new beginning happened. In fact, after 2025, we're going to see a new high. We just got to get through the pain and the challenges that we have now to be able to get to that high, because there's enough that has to be broken down from the old before we can start the new. The second of the seasons, which is the summer, is the awakening. This is where everything then starts to take form and a new structure is then born. A new world order is created. And then from that second one, you then get to the unraveling, where things already start to go south. And then finally you get to the next crisis 100 years from now. At every one of these different stages, you also have got an entire generation that gets born. So at the very beginning of the high, after the Great Depression and World War II, we had the baby boomers. The baby boomers were the ones known as the prophets, the ones that were able to be visionary and see the future. After the baby boomers came Generation X. That's my generation. These are the nomads, the ones that actually then traveled out and spread the new system or the new world order around the world. And then during the unraveling, you then have the heroes, the ones who actually start poking holes in this whole new world order. These are the millennials of the last 20 years. And then finally, to worry. So what can we learn from the book, and what can we learn about the next steps we should take? Straus and Howe looked at the fourth turning as the end of an entire cycle where everything changed. And so the last three turnings we had, well, 300 years ago, it was the American Revolution. The American Revolution was from around 1760s to 1790s. And then 100 years later, it was the American Civil War. from about the 1840s to 1850s. And then just 100 years ago, we then had the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, and then from the Great Depression, World War II. Now, if you're thinking these are just authors that just came up with some crazy theory, in fact, they're the same authors that came up with the concept of millennials. In fact, in their book, Millennials Rising, this became a Bible for the marketers of today, where they were showing how every generation has also got an archetype, and every archetype has got a different role at every point in the turning. In their book, The Fourth Turning, this is exactly what they say about each of the 5 different stages, starting with stage 1, the spark. A spark will ignite a new mood. The CDC announces the spread of a new communicable virus. Congress enacts mandatory quarantine measures.
At the very beginning of 2020, guys, it was all planned out.
Mayors resist. Urban gangs battle suburban militias. Calls mount for the president to declare martial law. So this is actually from the book where they're going through the different scenarios of what's likely to happen, which actually triggers the crisis, which means what you've seen so far is just the beginning. It's not the crisis itself. After the first phase, which is what we're in right now, comes the second stage, which is disruption. This is what they say about what's about to come. The new mood and its jarring new problems will provide a natural endpoint for the unraveling era decline in civic confidence. As a crisis catalyzes, these fears will rush to the surface, jagged and exposed. Distrustful of some things, the individuals will feel that their survival requires them to distrust more things. This behavior could cascade into a sudden downward spiral and implosion of societal trust. So everything we're going through right now is not about coronavirus. Everything we're going through right now is not about the riots in the streets. Everything we're going through is about a breakdown of the trust of the old system in order for a new system to be created, which has happened at every single time that there's been a fourth turning. So what about the third stage, which we can expect to see maybe 6 months or even 12 months away from now? The third stage is collapse. At some point, America's short-term crisis psychology will catch up with the long-term post-unraveling fundamentals. This might result in a great devaluation, a severe drop in the market price of most financial and real assets. As assets devalue, trust will further disintegrate, which will cause assets to devalue further, and so on. Many Americans won't know where their savings are, who their employer is, what their pension is, or how their government works.
Prepare for riots, okay? Financially. People are going to be rioting about their money. They're going to be protesting.
Before long, America's old civic order will seem ruined beyond repair. People will feel like a magnet has passed over society's disk drive, blanking out the social contract, wiping out old deals, clearing the books of vast, unpayable promises to which people have once felt entitled. Now, for those of you who've been following along on my channel, you know that I've already been posting some economic crisis videos about what's to come, given that we're just stepping into this right now. This was predicted 30 years ago by the two of them in the book. And more importantly, what's key is what you do now to prepare, because while a lot of people will be losing their wealth, there'll be others that'll be gaining brand new systems, structures, and even businesses off this crisis as well. And by the way, if you have not...
All right, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. There are going to be more. That's going to be the end of this video. There's going to be more, and I'm going to go into depth. All right, we're going to kind of see where we're at. It's going to be fun, though. I'm going to have fun with this series. All right, and then there's also another series I have that I'm going to be working on, the Saturn Time Cube. All right, guys. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs ups. If you didn't, then hit the thumbs downs. Express your opinion. Tell me what you think in the comments section. All right, guys. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Make sure you hit that notification bell. It makes a big difference. It actually does. And remember, hodl strong, guys, okay? Be prepared, be safe. Don't be scared, though, all right? I love you guys. Have a great day. Crypto Mike out. Peace.